Hey Facebook, how is everybody? We're here for the tall and the short of it today because it's Thursday and that's what we do. I hope you had a great weekend and everybody's been having a good week this week. Betsy, how was your week?
It's been fantastic. If you can't tell, sorry, nose is red. I've got a cough drop in. Came back sick. Actually, that just started yesterday. And got 2 new students this week.
Two new students in 1 week.
At least not on the same day.
Yeah, not on the same
Not on the same day.
Mm-hmm. So that's fun.
It has been. They've transitioned beautifully. And the rest of my class has done great with them as well.
Well, I wouldn't expect any less in your room, so that's right. So our topic this month is trauma-informed education, or the trauma-informed classroom. And last week we did Depressing Week, where we talked about our ACEs, our adverse childhood experiences. And so this week our new topic is
Classroom environment supports.
Exactly. So we're going to talk about those supports and strategies that you can use in the trauma-informed classroom. And this is also helpful for parents who might be raising a student or a child who has been exposed to trauma. If you're a foster parent or step parent, or you've got that child in your home, and you need some strategies. Some of these things can be used at home too. So awesome. So of course, I'm the crazy brain-based lady, right? And of the two of us.
You said it.
So I'm going to talk about really quick when we experience issues in the classroom from kids who've come from trauma. Basically, here's what's occurring. So let's say that Betsy has this new student. This didn't happen. I'm just making it up, okay? So let's say Betsy has this new student, and the first time she goes over to help him with his work, he all of a sudden crawls under the table and now won't talk to her. Okay? So what's the first thing that comes to your mind when that happens?
Well, that he's avoiding.
Okay.
Doing the work and I start going through, is the work too hard? Where has he just been? Was he? I start looking at my environment and what's happening in my room now. However, I don't know if you're wanting me to go somewhere.
No, I'm not. Based. No, I'm just seriously. Like that's where most of us would go. Is what did I run up on him too quick? What happened that caused this? Right away, we start asking ourselves questions about what's going on here. So what we know about kids who come from a trauma environment, keep getting notifications, is that whenever they perceive, the key word here is perceive, whenever they perceive someone or something to be a threat or something anxiety causing or a stressor, they may what's called downshift in their brain. So, hey Jake, so what it means when we talk about downshift is we've got our brain up here in our head, we've got the 2 halves of our brain which do most of the work, but then we've got this thing at the very base of our brain stem called the amygdala, and that is our fight or flight center, right? That's our animalistic part of that brain that it helps protect us. If something goes flying towards us, it makes us duck without thinking about it. If something, happens like that, I don't think I'm that low. It said low battery, but I don't think I'm that low on battery. We're going to talk fast. So whenever that perceived threat happens, automatically our brain shifts into, I'm either going to fight you or I'm going to run away. So one thing that could be going on with this student, if they've gone through trauma, is they are perceiving something as a threat. And that could be a reason they might have crawled under that table.
Well, and actually, isn't it fight, flight, and now they've added freeze?
Sure. Yeah, they could just freeze, too. And
I just mean in general,
Yes, that
not like for this trauma. I mean, just the fight or flight mode.
Deer in headlights mode. Yeah, exactly.
Or freeze. Yeah,
for sure. Fight or freeze. So yeah, that could be part of it too. So like I said, but the key point I'll point that word out again, is their perception of the situation. Doesn't mean it's reality all the time. Doesn't mean you did anything that you wouldn't have done to a normal student, or that what you did wasn't something that was okay to do to any other student, or or even to them. Like, you just may have to realize that if you have kids that have gone through trauma, they may react differently to something you normally do, because they may perceive it as a threat.
Right.
So
it could be the difference of taking the seat next to them rather than standing up next to them. Because when you stand up next to them, you're
right.
Well, in my building now, I do tower over them. When I taught middle school, it wasn't so much the case.
Yes. For sure.
I took the seat next to them so they didn't tower over me.
Sure.
But it kind of takes that threatening, things like that.
Right. So that leads us to two kinds of reactions that kids can have whenever they perceive something in the classroom as a threat. And even something as small as, this work is too hard, could be the threat. Or too much. Not even that's too hard, it's just too much.
Or the threat may not have come from you, it may have come from another student.
That's true, also. So okay, so you want to talk about the two kinds?
So we have external and internal. And this, typically students have a chosen reaction. And they typically react the same, I would say, most often. So you get the same behavior from a student. They've kind of, this is my reaction. I run, I scream, I yell at you, I
throw something.
Throw things at you. Externally, it could also...
hey, Marcia. Hey, Nanette.
It could also be an external reaction. Could be like them crawling under things. Sometimes they crawl under it and then make noises and have a verbal outburst.
Or they might just cry. They could cry. There's a lot of different reactions like that. Something that some do is, because they know they're getting to the point where they're going to externalize, is they'll internalize big time. Whereas I'm putting my head down on the desk, I'm not looking at anyone, I've got my hood up over my head, I've got, however I can hide myself because they're actually using that as a coping strategy. This is my coping strategy to keep from getting in trouble right now. And then if there's a rule saying you can't have your hood up, or you can't wear that hat, or you can't have your head down, or you can't sleep, or you can't, then they're getting in trouble for the coping strategy they're trying to use to keep from blowing up externally. Right. So, like I said, I say it over and over and over again, many times. Our kids that have experienced trauma, their coping strategies are what gets them in trouble. It is a survival skill in their environment. Because you never know, and I'm just going to give one example. You never know if you've got a high school kid who's constantly, blows up at the teacher if they question them about homework or whatever. That kid at home, maybe someone, maybe mom had a boyfriend over and they got too drunk and they are yelling at the kid and won't leave him alone or whatever, and the only time that person will leave him alone is if he screams at them. That works in his home environment, so he's going to try it in another environment.
And then, honestly, the internal ones are, for me, the most frustrating. Because we've talked before about behavior is communication, and if there really isn't an outward behavior, it's more quiet, they're withdrawing, not saying anything, hiding. You can't see, even the slightest little thing, sometimes I want to see like a little peek, they're not going to do that because this is real. This isn't those little peek outs and stuff, or when they're,
and I'm going to skip in our notes down to this one real quick, because what you're talking about actually is when a child has gone through trauma, they lose control during that trauma. They don't feel in control and they don't feel safe. So a lot of times the coping mechanisms they use and the outward behaviors they show, or the inward behaviors they show, are their way of being in control. So, and next week we're going to touch on these. I'm not going to go into it now, but we're going to go through disabilities that come from being exposed to trauma, and one of those is selective mutism. So we'll start talking about that next Thursday.
Wow, you guys have to wait a while.
I know. Of how that is not it's them wanting to have control. So, yeah.
But, do you want me to talk a little bit about how we go about, are we going to talk about the supports later then?
No, I think we're going to do this part first.
No, I meant for these two. When I talk about internal things I would do, do you want to wait? And
yeah, we'll do that to the end. We'll do that to the end.
But yeah, so anyways, the internal, you're not going to get verbal. You're not going to get a verbal exchange with them during that time. You probably won't even see their face. They want, they might stay at their desk and sit there, but you are not going to get a response. They're going to just be quiet because they, like she said, they know if I open my mouth, I'm going to end up in trouble. So, and that actually should be taken as a compliment to you because, which we'll talk about here in a little bit too, but chances are they don't hold it in for everybody.
No.
So if they're holding it in for you,
if they hold it in for you all day at school, it's probably coming out when they get home.
Well, I just mean like, say,
or
your middle school,
teacher.
high school, they're in a different. But if they're in your class and are holding it together or not, being quiet and not going off, that's a compliment, meaning that
they care what you think.
You've built that relationship, which we'll talk about.
Sure. So, what we want to talk about then is what do we put in place? What keeps kids who have experienced trauma feeling safe and secure, and has them upshifted in their brain to the spot where they can learn. So there are 3 things that research is showing are the 3 biggest things you can do as a teacher or a parent to make that work.
Hey, Patty.
The first one would be structure. So structure. And we know that all kids like structure. So again, these things are things you can do for all kids, and it's going to work for your kids with trauma. So as well. So structure is the first one. Boundaries are the second one. They have to know where the boundaries are. And then routines. Structure, boundary, and routines. So, and a lot of times we say structure and routines and we think it's the same thing. It's not. So structure is there a schedule? Is it predictable? Are we, is this, I know what's coming. I know that they have to know and then feel like I know what I'm doing here, and I know because I know what I felt like if I don't know what the agenda is for a day,
right?
Or I hate that. I always want, if I go to a seminar or I go to anything, I want to know what the agenda is for the day. There needs to be a structure, and I need to know when my lunch is going to be. I'm not one of those people that's like, oh, you do whatever up there. I want to see a schedule at the beginning, and kids who've experienced trauma, if they can have a predictable structure, they're happy. The second one then, boundaries. They have to know where the line is. They have to know these are the expectations, and this is what will happen if you don't meet those expectations. So they have to know both, right? So that's that. And then routines is whatever your procedures are in that structure. So yes, my structure is we're always going to do morning work first, but what are the procedures for morning work now? So these are the routines that we do during morning work, or these are the routines we do for lunch.
Hey, Mom.
Miss Nancy Duckworth. Hello. So those 3 things, structure, boundaries, and routines, super important. And if you're worried about whether or not you're doing enough for kids in your room with trauma, write those 3 words down on a sheet and brainstorm all the ways you provide structure, all the ways you provide boundaries, and all the ways you provide routines. And then just take a look at that and see if you can tweak it or make it any better. And we'll talk a little bit about that coming up kind of next. These are the more strategies and things you can do when kids are needing help with that emotional regulation, and they've downshifted into that back part of the brainstem.
Well, the very first thing, and this is something you should do with all kids, but it's very important to do it with kids who have been a product of trauma, is you have to build that relationship. And what I mean is, obviously you have a group of kids in your class, you have a relationship with all of them, but you have to have a relationship in that they know that they are safe with you. And when Jenny was talking about structure, boundaries, routines, one of the main reasons they know they're safe with you is because you follow through. And if there is that change in any of those, you let them know. And it could be right before. I'm not saying you have to give them a schedule the day before and say this is, but you may have made a point to go over to them specifically and say, hey, I just wanted to give you a heads up. Something's going to be a little different today. And maybe this is why. I do try to give them that, because it's like you're letting them in a little secret. But
those things are good for kids on the spectrum. Those are good for things kids, I mean all kids. Your class needs to know those changes too.
But building that relationship is where what it kind of in my mind boils down to is it's a constant, I don't know what's going to happen next in the world where the trauma has happened. You're trying to create a world where they know exactly, even if they don't know what's going to happen next, they know they're safe with you.
Right.
So, and they know that if they lose control, that you are there to support them with that.
Right.
That
and
you
we're
are
going
able
to have rapport again afterwards.
Yes. And that
it's not going to be that there's going to continue to be an adversarial relationship here. We're going to build rapport again when this is over, and I'm going to like you, and we're going to be okay.
And you're going to like me after I've treated you so horribly. Because honestly, sometimes they do try to hold it in, but at the same time, when they can't, you're going to be the one that gets
They're going to yell, I hate you, you're stupid, this is our swear words or whatever. And you have to just let that go over and through you, pass over and through you, and not react. Absolutely.
And honestly, I think it's very good for your relationship once you've gone through one of those, like the first time, they actually will kind of do those to test you. Do you really mean what you say? You followed through with everything else you've said.
Yeah, never make that idle threat.
No. Are you going to, I have yelled and cussed at you. Are you still going to be there for me afterwards? And
and Marcia, you're so right. Transitions. When dealing with trauma kids, anytime there's a transition, that's going to be a rocky spot for them until they have that routine down. And know this is my structure. This is the routine that's built into that structure. Absolutely, for sure. Okay, so social emotional training, and what I mean by training is they really need counseling. Kids in trauma need counseling. As a school, sometimes we are limited on the amount of true counseling we can do, and we don't always have people in a school environment that are trained in trauma counseling. In fact, that's pretty rare.
Yeah.
So what are some things we can do even if we don't have someone trained in trauma counseling? Because there are very specific things that they do in that type of a counseling situation where they're going to talk about the trauma. Maybe we don't want to do that piece with them. Maybe it's not our area of expertise because we don't know how to help with that. Hopefully parents can follow through with the counseling piece, or we can work with an outside agency to help with that. A lot of schools do partner with outside agencies to help with counseling in the building. But if you don't have access to that piece, don't try to do it in the place of a real counselor, because that's not okay, and you're taking on a liability that you don't want to take on. You want to love on them and you want to help them. These are things you can do for them. So first is teaching them really, and I'm not talking about spiritual, I'm talking about just simple meditations, positive affirmations. We're all going to close our eyes and we're going to pretend we're a turtle, and we're going to move very slowly. We're going to stretch our arm out of our shell, and we're going to stretch when we're working with little kids, these are the kind of things we do. We had a program that I bought you. It was called Yogarilla. That was it had little cards that you put up that have a gorilla doing yoga poses. But these were just very calming activities where kids use their bodies, they are mindful, they're thinking about what's going on with their bodies, and you talk them through, okay, now I'm going to relax my head, I'm going to relax my shoulders, I'm going to relax, these kinds of little meditations or breathing exercises. We're going to take a big deep breath in, we're going to let our big breath out.
When I teach that to kids, we'll lay down on, sorry, I'm going to talk and you're not going to see me, but we lay down on our backs, because a lot of times when you ask kids to take a deep breath, when you ask kids to take a deep breath, yes, Yogarilla, you feel it the next day when you do Yogarilla. But when you have kids take a deep breath, a lot of times they just go, and it's all up here. So you lay down on your back, and so you call it belly breathing, and you want them, that way they can feel and see their bellies get bigger when they take those breaths, so that they're taking a deep breath from all the way down.
More oxygenated your brain can get, the better you can learn, upshift, all of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and then mindfulness practices in general. Let's be mindful that when we go into the hallway, there might be this going on, and we want to stay in our line, and we want to, helping kids. Pre-correct is another word for that. It's pre-correction of what's going to happen, and here's what my expectation is for this. To let them know what you expect, and then really be able to praise them for that once they've completed that. So those emotional regulation activities are huge. You can also do things like if their focus and attention isn't there, you can do things where you have them, hey, I want you to think about what's distracting you and talk to me about that. Okay, how can we reduce that distraction? What's something we could try? I mean, you can talk, the older the kid is, the more you can talk about that stuff with them, that they can help you with monitoring that.
I'm waiting for that day to come for you to say that to me.
Yeah, I try not to counsel you either.
What is actually distracting you?
So those are some things you can try. Do you want to talk about discipline?
Yes. When they are doing this, they are not making the choice to do something. They're not going, oh, is this a good choice or a bad choice? No, it's like it's an instinctual
fight or flight.
Yeah, instinctual thing for them. So when we talk about discipline, do we look at it as, should we look at doing something restorative, or should they be getting in trouble? Should it be punitive? And obviously, it should be restorative. And and
that doesn't mean they never get a punitive action. There's sometimes where there has to be consequences if they hit someone,
right,
or if they if they hurt someone. But it also needs to be coupled with the restorative.
And you kind of have to do the restorative before you can make the punitive be effective.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Because if you love how you just said that. I love how you just said that.
Do the punitive first, you're just going to go right back into where you were before,
right,
and
have more. Because now you've put a giant hole in the relationship. Yep. If you punitive and you don't talk to them again, you put a hole in your relationship. Kids with trauma hold grudges. I'm going to tell you right.
Yes.
I know some kids who've been through trauma, and when they have a bad relationship with somebody, it's forever. And they're not giving you even one other chance. So you got to be careful. You have to be really careful with your relationships. It's very fragile with kids with trauma.
We call this therapeutic rapport. Actually,
yes.
we do, because we've been through training that calls it
CPI
that.
training.
CPI training calls it that. But it is very much where you are building, and you're building that relationship, but you're also talking through the situation, and you're letting the child do, if they are able to. I have been through some that they led the therapeutic rapport, and you just kind of sat back and they told you.
And this is all happening after the meltdown's over, after they're no longer aggressive, and after they're.
Even after the meltdown, they need some time to regroup.
Space.
Because honestly, they're usually exhausted.
They may need a nap before you guys can have therapeutic rapport if they're little.
And so, but during that, you're talking about. You're talking about serious stuff. Like, this isn't okay that you did this. How can we work towards, fixing this? How can we do this better? And so,
how can we restore your relationship with little Susie that you just hit on the playground?
Right.
So it's not just the relationship between the authority figure and the child. That has to happen too. But it also has to happen between the child and whoever they harmed, if that is what occurred, or they had that conflict with.
Well, or if it happened in the classroom, and maybe they didn't physically harm anyone, but the other kids saw. Or
the other kids are scared now because of what they did. And that comes up a lot. If a kid has a major blow up in the classroom has to be evacuated so that we can handle the student that's gone through a trauma. Sometimes those other kids are afraid now of that child, and helping them. This is what might happen when the other kids are around you now, and this is why, and this is how you need to help them trust you again. That helping them with that. And I just found this really exciting because I didn't even think about this before. Another one of the really great research-based practices for trauma-informed teaching is doing team building exercises in your classroom. So And I know I've used team building exercises before in my classroom, but I didn't make the connection between, hey, that can help with kids with trauma, because having them build relationships with the other students in the room, that this is a safe place, we trust each other, we, that's just so huge. And like I said, when we went through, did the Indiana Writing Project, where we learned all about being teachers of writing, and one of the biggest things about sharing your writing was how vulnerable you have to be, and that you have to make the classroom a safe place. So that same thing applies here, helping all the kids feel like we're in a safe place and we can be vulnerable and we can share our feelings.
And we talk about this stuff, but this is just good. A lot of this is just good practice across the board, because it fits in so many situations.
Right.
And it's so crazy for me to think back, like I said last week, this whole trauma idea, and
looking through that lens
is new. I mean, I've dealt with kids with trauma since my first year of teaching. And we won't talk about when that was. And
you.
So, I was still in school when you started.
I know.
So, but looking at it like that, I recognize it makes me a little more mindful when I am, I look back and I'm like, oh, that was good. I'm so glad I did that. I had no clue it was something good. But
I handled that all wrong.
I can't believe I did that. Something we did not talk about, but before we did, wanted to share, is that we really didn't address, like we said, sometimes they'll, when they're being aggressive or even hiding or whatever, we didn't really talk about, were we going to talk about this week or next? Giving them space?
Oh, no, that was this week.
Okay. And we said, okay. So, when this is happening, the child is acting out, or maybe they're just putting their head, now if they're acting out, you do have to respond a little differently. But we were kind of talking about, you can see it building, or a kid is putting their head down, and honestly, a lot of times giving them space is the best thing you can do.
Right.
And that
can become in a couple of forms. Like
right.
I said, if you have a trusting relationship with that student, you could still approach them and say, hey, do you need to take a break? And let them go to the hallway, let them go get a drink, let them use a bathroom, whatever.
You know that they can leave the room and not.
Right, and they're going to be okay.
Be okay,
right.
Yeah.
But I have, noticed, hey, they're looking like they're getting frustrated. Maybe they need a break. If you have a sensory room, that's a great place for breaks too. But that, as long as you have that good relationship, you can approach a kid when they're in that I'm building my frustration mode.
Yeah. But I can remember back to years ago when I didn't know what I was doing with but I had a student that I would recognize, I can't talk to you right now because
he'll blow up.
Or he'll ignore, and that was something that was very you don't ignore me, you get into that power thing.
Yeah,
no,
never get in a power struggle.
No, but I would just let them be. And I guess I was using the term and I've had students since that it's better I just ignore. I ignore, they're doing little things, making noises, and I just ignore the behavior. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean I'm completely oblivious to what the child is doing.
Or that you may not address it later.
Yes.
You're just not going to let that child interrupt your teaching.
It is very important to keep your eye on those cues, and the more this happens, the more you'll notice, okay, this is where we are now. We're getting ready to move into this stage. We're getting ready to move into this stage. I love how I use my hands, but I'm off.
Yeah.
Off the way. It's backwards. So, but that's just something that as each child, I told Jenny, they're all so different. When I think back to all the kids that I've had, and how I've treated them, they've all been so different. So it is very much about building that relationship but staying and knowing that child, but also staying in tune. You don't. Someone may come in your room and they may be like, I can't believe you're
allowing that to happen.
You're allowing that to happen. That kid's under the table and you're not doing anything. Nope, they're going to stay under there until they're ready.
That's where they need to be right now.
So those kinds of things. And hopefully
and you get to know where your line is with that child once you have that relationship, because there are some kids you leave under the table, and then there are other kids where you're like, hey, to a different adult, because you know they just need a different person right now.
Yeah.
They're not wanting to talk to me because I just gave them hard math homework or you know whatever. You grab a person that's coming by in the hallway and they come in and they're like, hey, what can you tell me what you need right now? And they're like, I need Legos. And they go right with that person, and it that makes teachers so mad. But
hey,
you know what? Here's
me
the thing.
too, but
it's sometimes exactly they just need a different person who was not placing a demand on me right now, and that's okay.
Definitely at
it's
the
not
younger,
personal.
I would say it's definitely younger ages too, because they can't verbalize what they don't know.
Like I said, the worst thing you can do though is gang up on a student who's gone through trauma, have 3 or 4 people around them trying to talk about the behavior and discipline all at the same time.
And here's something to remember: we don't always know if a student has had trauma.
We don't.
I mean, I'll be honest, like as a special ed teacher, I probably know more often than maybe a student who hasn't been through the evaluation process. So in a regular classroom, a teacher...
Right, only because we get to see health and developmental histories.
Yes. And we end up chatting a lot with parents and all that good stuff.
Sure.
So recognize that just because you don't know that it has occurred, maybe no one knows that it's occurring.
This may be a kiddo who has abuse or neglect going on right now in their life, but no one knows yet.
Yeah. So that's definitely something to keep in mind.
Yeah, to just treat all kids like they may have gone through trauma, and then you're going to be fine.
Yeah. Because like we said, all of these, all of this works for all kids.
It does. And it's just good teaching and good practices, and it's all research-based. So, that's the thing I try to tell myself all the time is I treat kids the way I'd want to be treated. If they are disrespectful to me, I just let them know, hey, I don't talk to you that way. Can you try that again? Immediately, they're like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Well, and also, if you hadn't noticed, if you hadn't seen what Jenny shared today.
Oh, yeah.
The book, Help for Billy.
Awesome book.
That was my first really introduction. That was the light bulb moment. Like, if you read it, you're going to sit there and go, oh my gosh, as a teacher especially, you're going to, like, past students are going to kind of pop in your head going, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
You're going to be like all the way through it. Oh my God, that's Joey. Oh my God, that's Matthew. Oh my God, that's your just names are going to come to your head over and over and over again. And it just,
it was very eye-opening for me, but in a great way. Like, it was...
Right. It validated some of the things I did that were right, and it told me a few things that I had done that I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have done that, but I guess I won't anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, well, I hope this has been really helpful for you guys, because that is what we have for this week. Next week, we're going to talk about disabilities that can come from being exposed to adverse childhood experiences. And we're going to kind of go into depth into a few that come up quite often in the educational environment. So that should be a super fun one, because these are things that, like, the first time I had a student with selective mutism, or the first time I had a student with RADS, I'm like, what's going on here?
It's a whole different
new ball game here, and we got to do some research. So we're hopefully going to share some things that might help you with a student you're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
So
leave your questions and comments for us.
Absolutely.
Guys.
And if you're watching this on replay, make sure to put a hashtag replay in the comments so we know that you watched. Give us some hearts and emojis and all that good stuff. We welcome any of your questions and comments and ideas always on our timeline. So feel free to use that as well. And then that's it today for the tall and the short of it.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.